Hey guys, it's Julesy, and I am back for another video. Finally, it has definitely been some time, but we are here now to discuss how TikTok has become fertile ground for grooming and why that is a concern, not just for how children and young people use the app, but also for how people who are in a vulnerable place, space, or state of mind might also be receiving such messaging that pushes them towards abusive relationships. Now, first of all, I need to thank my sponsor, Audible, who not only brought this video to you, but allowed me to even have the time, space of mind to be here to do this video right now. Because for those of you who don't know, and those of you who do know, I am a full-time graduate student in the public history program. And baby, the joy that I have found in my history books being available as audiobooks on Audible. Thank you. Just had to lead a class last week reading Wicked Flesh by Jessica M. Johnson. It's a history book. It's a great read for me. It's not a book that I'm suggesting anybody else go pick up. I'll talk about it on my Patreon later on when I talk about the books that I've enjoyed this semester. But finding that book on Audible, babes, there's no way I could have got through that book and the 15 other books I have to read this week if it wasn't for Audible. So if you are new to Audible, if you have not gotten into the grace that is audiobooks, text Julesy, Jouelzy, to 500 or use my link. It'll be posted down below in the description box, audible.com/Julesy to get your first month off free. I'm telling y'all. On top of that, I do run a book club. If you new here, please slide on over to smartbrowngirl.com and sign up. We welcome all identities. And I have been able to keep up with school and keep up with the book club by listening to audiobooks. My Audible library list. Okay, y'all. It's hitting. And within our book club, we really try to push forward the idea that no matter what format you are digesting a book, that is reading. Audiobooks are actual reading, and this month's read in the book club, Opal and Nev, such an enjoyable listen on Audible that I think sometimes some books just make for better audiobooks. Like the experience, it's heightened. Okay, I'm trying to tell y'all, it's chef's kiss. I got the list. I know the ones that are good for you, so stay with me. But thank you to Audible for even allowing me to do this video, and now let's get into it. Now, first, the idea of groomers and the context in which we'll be talking about is age gap relationships, where we have a significantly younger partner to a significantly older partner. And I'm going to try and be conscious and just kind of acknowledge outright, this is not always about a younger woman and an older man. Even though I'm inclined to talk in the heteronormative sense, grooming happens across gender and sexual identities. It can be a younger man and an older man, a younger woman and an older woman. There might even be some prevalence where the more intersections and the more kind of vulnerable within society that group of people is, the more we tend to see the stratification happening and the grooming and age gap and the predatory aspect of it come into play. Even though within this context and within discussing how it often functions on TikTok, I'm not only inclined to talk about it in the heteronormative sense, I will also probably likely be talking about it from the sense of a young woman, older man, but I want to acknowledge outright that this crosses sexual and gender identities, and this is not scapegoating anyone. To get back to what actually is grooming, the groomer in this context is the person who tries to gain control of another person. They try to trick, connive, manipulate, or coax a target into some form of sexual behavior. Grooming is a preparation and a process for the groomer. Sometimes it is deliberate and carefully planned out. Other times, groomers are just simply mimicking the behavior they have seen, heard, or learned from others. Regardless, in almost all cases, groomers do not know how to create a healthy relationship. And they tend to have a warped, self-centered viewpoint about what they can do for others. It was something that I would actually call a paternalistic viewpoint, in which they believe that they know better than anyone else, and that not only do they know better, but they are the ones that are able to provide and to give. And if you come into and you follow their lead, all things will go well. and paternalistic as a history major often comes up in talking about slavery. It's not a good thing, y'all. Also, grooming is very much so a learned behavior. And it can be a learned behavior from misinformation on relationships that we receive from peers, from media, and from adult role models. And as a Black woman who often is talking specifically to a Black community, even though this context has a much larger playing field, I know many of the things I'm going to say in this video, they're not new concepts at all. We have gone through this, especially as a millennial, as a child of the 90s, when we used to have call rooms. I mean, even when we get to talking about the dynamics that exist in porn and the different images that we've often been told about the older partner and the younger person. And, to flip it on its head, even though this is often going to be framed from the older man, younger woman, I think, it's easier to frame that in the predatory sense because for some warped reason in society, the young man, older woman has been seen as a celebratory cause of the younger man, a conquest. An ability to put the game down, and no, it's still very much so on the role of the older adult, of the older woman, a predatory action. Grooming is never okay, no matter how we might be inclined to frame it in society. Now, because we're talking about this in the context of a social media app, and why the social media app TikTok has become fertile ground for grooming context, we also have to talk about some aspects of social media, that being parasocial relationships. And parasocial relationships define the relationship that an audience has with a person that they are watching via media. Someone who you do not have direct physical or interpersonal access to, but an influencer, the relationship that I might have with my audience, the relationship you might have with the celebrities, the people that you listen to, right? That's called a parasocial relationship. And in the past 20 years, the way parasocial relationships have functioned have vastly changed with the uptick of social media and with every new app that comes out. The way that influencers and content creators and celebrities are able to monetize said parasocial relationship has very obviously changed the dynamics of said relationships. Now, until the early 2000s, how we interacted parasocially with celebrities and how we used them for escapism and aspirational content, there was a good distance because the distance was literally between the TV, the movie screen, the tabloid, and us. There was very little way to know about the day-to-day insights or aspects of a celebrity outside of shows like The Lifestyle of the Rich and Famous, MTV Cribs, and or The Simple Life, where we got glimpses of the lives and minds of the rich and famous. And all that content was highly curated and edited and positioned in a certain frame. Then we are introduced and influenced by Keeping Up with the Kardashians. And with this reality series, we start to see a merger between TV and social media and a decreasing distance between the general public and the wealthy and famous. Besides the fact that Keeping Up with the Kardashians is a reality show, so you're already getting a much more intimate perspective on a celebrity or wealthy and famous family's life. Then they all hop on social media and the walls just start to come down and the dynamics shift. Now, Keeping Up with the Kardashians is not simply an example of how our parasocial relationships have evolved in the past 20 years, but also how grooming content has been normalized. Because if we take it back, we remember that one Kylie Jenner was dating Tyga, a rapper that I never listened to. Their relationship was showcased on Keeping Up with the Kardashians, and Kylie Jenner was absolutely 16 years old when they started dating. Then we have the royal asshole himself, Scott Disick, dating Sophie Richie with a 16-year age gap in their relationship. And this is where you see these age gap relationships where one partner is leaning towards teen years, young adulthood. You start to see these relationships become normalized. And one thing that's particular in the Keeping Up with the Kardashian franchise is how how grooming is justified because the younger person comes from a wealthy family. And we are overvaluing the safety that wealth provides at emotional. And so this age difference with this younger partner skewing towards young adult, if not actual teenage, puts them at an even higher risk for emotional and mental manipulation. Wealth is not going to stop that from happening, even if we are inclined to use wealth as a justification for why they should be allowed to do it, or why it should be normalized, or why it's not that big of a deal. On the flip side, I do think we have an easier time understanding why these age gap relationships are problematic, especially when the younger partner is damn near a teenager. When we are talking about people of color, people with intersectional identities who are low income, come from harder backgrounds, we understand that their vulnerability, but I also feel like that plays into a pathology of how we view poor people as not having their wits about them or not being smart enough. Somehow we are inclined to believe that celebrity and wealth makes somebody an intellectual. Babes, I would like us to get away from that as well. But let's zoom back out here, right? Because the Keeping Up with the Kardashians puts us into the 2010s and the 2020s. And we start to see just overall, when we get back to the concept of a parasocial relationship, yes, they are absolutely normalizing grooming, but also to the larger point about how they have reshaped parasocial relationships, we are seeing this like sort of aspirational aspect coexist with and take over the role of celebrity, where it's not just escapism, but it's also this idea that we can attain the lifestyle of the rich and famous. And then, because we're getting sold on a thing, right? This aspirational quality is absolutely telling you, well, yeah, you could attain what I have if you buy what I have and you buy it from me or you buy it through my affiliate link. And then the higher social currency that this creates within parasocial relationships, the currency becomes even higher with the less boundaries an influencer puts between themselves and an audience. So absolutely, the less boundaries you have with your audience, the more monetary gain you could potentially pull from them. We're gonna put a pin here and come back to this, because all this is going to connect together, because it's not just that parasocial relationships, it's not just that the Kardashians or whomever normalize grooming. It's also very much so where we are societally at that allows this messaging to propagate and to be promoted in a particular way that it is on TikTok. As the oppression of women becomes a more mainstream topic, so are the solutions that are going to be sold to us under capitalism. And what I mean by that is, as women movements started to take off in the 2010s, so we get the Me Too movement, we get this sort of resurgence of feminism in a pop culture sense. We also are being sold on concepts because, I don't want to get too theoretical, but that's just how neoliberalism functions. In that rather than providing actual equitable solutions that change the social structures we live under, neoliberalism kind of always reshifts to sell the individual on a concept in which we put the onus, the shame, and the blame back onto the individual. And we very much so see this happen with the making of girl boss feminism, where you work hard, you make money, and you consume luxury goods, rinse and repeat, and boom, somehow that resolves your problems, even though it doesn't. And then when you fail to resolve your issues through this fame of girl boss feminism, it's, well, you didn't do it right. You didn't buy the right thing. You didn't invest your time or your money or partner with the right person. Always getting sold on something. It is. Then we couple that with the aesthetics of luxury that, again, is something that is being sold to all of us, including young women and girls, as a marker of success. Now, again, none of this is new, but it's particular how this is functioning within social media, because The parasocial relationships have changed. Celebrities seem much more close in our aspirational conquest, along with influencer culture. And it makes it seem like it's just something so achievable to the masses like never before. And again, within the neoliberalistic, the late stages of capitalism, we are absorbing these beliefs that if we have not positioned ourselves a certain way, that's why we are dealing or struggling, or that's why certain things that are very much so structural issues become individual issues, like abilities to attain high paying jobs, abilities to live a wealthy lifestyle. And it removes all context, all context. Because it's not like we're talking about what does like grind culture and sacrifices, or even the sort of debt people are taking on to achieve these lifestyles. Yeah, and I'm often coming back to this concept. My bangs are in the way, but like I come back around to this concept of, neoliberalism reshifting the blame from social structures onto the individual, because like literally we are living in a time period, in a real pandemic, where our government and our social structures are absolutely failing us. Like outside is very expensive right now, and on top of that, societally we are getting poorer. The class stratification is growing, and then we are receiving constant messaging that informs us that the way we correct the failures of our perceived lifestyle is through making our relationships transactional. Across the board, we are constantly told that our family, our friendships, and most definitely our intimate partnerships should be transactional relationships. And this messaging goes so far because it makes it seem so easy for us to fill in the gaps for our basic needs via transactional relationships. And regardless of how you feel about transactional relationships, the point I really want to connect to here is that this sets up a perfect breeding ground for someone that believes that transactional relationships are good, especially a young person, especially a person in a vulnerable predicament or state of being. You combine that with a large age gap, with people who are in vulnerable positions in life, whether it is because of their young age or because of whatever things that they have gone through in life, how they are othered, how they are ostracized by society. It sets up the perfect breeding ground for abuse. Now, why am I centering this around TikTok? TikTok has one of the most exact and powerful algorithms that quickly picks up on what is going to grab each individual user's attention. That means it also has the quickest pipeline towards a fringe movement. And I have been on the internet for a very long time. And I have watched every single social media app that's come out to have and to start with a very powerful algorithm. That is what grabs you in. That is what keeps you on. And each one of them has been called out in a very major way for how they have radicalized youth. I'm a YouTuber, and I absolutely dealt with adpocalypse. But adpocalypse was spearheaded because the New York Times did an expose on how YouTube was funneling young white men into neo-Nazism. YouTube and Facebook have been called out for their influencing of political elections in the United States, in Brazil, in Southeast Asia. We are living in a time of where there's been so much discussion in all the major news outlets about people feeding into QAnon conspiracy theories. And there's a direct connection to the conspiracy theorists of YouTube to people going into far-right radical groups. To bring it back down and to distill it and make it even more personal, I'm a person that loves being on TikTok, right? I also see how my For You page could quickly lead me, based on my interests, down a rabbit hole of fringe movements. I'm very quick to use the not interested feature on TikTok. I'm also an adult who lives in the online space as a career, who studies history, who's very much so into how mis and disinformation travel, particularly around the Black digital landscape. So I might be acutely more aware than the average person. But as someone, the algorithm has definitely picked up that I love Black people, I love Black babies, And I love seeing Black families, and I love seeing older Black people with like very innocuous, before you even get into what my possible more radical politics are, but very innocent sort of content. I could very much so tell For You page knows I'm a single Black female. I'm astounded at how quickly, if I spend a significant time on the app, I get led to anti-Black men, divestment, content, and or single Black women, or the downfall of the Black family content. And it's not often packaged in a very bombastic way. It's either single Black women or like codified homophobia that I see on my For You page, and it's veiled in regular, everyday, trendy content. Divestment is literally a fringe movement, and it's really easy to get sucked on that, especially on TikTok. And I know plenty of people that go down that pipeline with content here on YouTube. But the difference is on TikTok is that you are getting a much younger audience. And the parasocial gap on TikTok is even slimmer than it is on any other social media platform, because of how much easier it is for content to go viral on TikTok. The more personal, front-facing camera angle and the built-in conversational features like duet and stitches bridge the gaps between the viewer and the creator, and it also allows content to just spread. The way you can share through duets and stitches and add your own voice and create these much larger conversations and reframe and reshape and continue to evolve these conversations. You can't do that here on YouTube. You can share a video, you can comment on a video, you can share a video within your group text, but you can't, the ability to stitch and duet and use sounds and create really easy content that also very quickly devoids context, just makes things travel so much faster and further. As much as I would love to push back against this idea that TikTok is only for kids, they are the larger portion of TikTok users. It is estimated that children, teens, and young adults, people younger than 24 years old, make up over half of the app's users. Therefore, the trends that I am ingesting as a 36-year-old are also much more likely to have a disproportionate impact on children and young people. So all these things that I have thus far discussed, the socioeconomic stratification, outside is more expensive, we are getting poorer, societal messaging that constantly shifts the blame onto the individual, and not the social structures or the institutions, coupled with like the powerful social media algorithm of TikTok that can quickly lead anybody's interest into the pipeline towards a fringe movement, and the relationship advice that's telling us that relationships should be transactional, they should provide you wealth and stability, along with the way that we have largely normalized through the closing of this parasocial gap, through the way celebrities and influencers position their lifestyles. We have already normalized age gap relationships with a significantly younger, if not teenage person, as long as the partner is wealthy. All of these things converge for literally the perfect storm to make TikTok a breeding ground for grooming, with the belief that particularly older men are more likely to be able to provide financial stability. TikTok prioritizes short form video, and what we're seeing in this grooming category, particular to age gap relationships, is content that, as I said, again, relating to other things, this specific content is absolutely devoid of context and very often filmed from the younger partner's point of view. Pipeline for everything starts with seemingly innocuous content, but particularly here, we might be seeing a couple where the age gap is very quickly visibly noticeable. And the man has various signifiers physically of being wealthy and attractive. These age gap couples are then able to create brands out of their relationship that centers this image of wealth and supposed fun that they are able to have and achieve with little to no context about any of the partners' backgrounds, any of the other things that just we all know naturally come into intimate partnerships. People are complicated. There are so many more things outside of your partner being able to take you out for dinner and buy you drinks and give you cash to do your nails and hair. There are so many other things in a relationship that complicates how two people come together, that this framing of a relationship that is desirable simply because your older partner is assumed that because of their age, because of their older age, that they are able to provide and able to make your life good and so much better than anybody else could possibly make it. And I mean, even the most basic questions of, were they previously married? Do they have children? We very rarely hear, especially with the younger woman, older man, we very rarely hear the point of view of the man. We very rarely even hear him speak. And these relationships are often very comfortably feeding into the patriarchal perception of the younger woman being arm candy with the older sugar daddy. And we all know. We know. And then we get such a close focus on the surface level material benefits of dating older men with none of the risk, with none of the potential complications, with none of the discussion about being a significantly younger person and how that power dynamic puts you at a loss, about the way that spending your 20s with someone who is 15, 16 years older than you can entirely shape your lives in ways that you will never be able to get back, in ways that can take a long time to dig yourself out of those holes. And none of these concepts are new. It's interesting to me how I see these promulgate on TikTok because they're often framed in like trendy dances or like trendy sounds like that. Because, you know, when that like whole like, it was like what, a Russian song or something people were using and crossing their hands with their friends. And I'm going to put some of the TikToks here. They'll likely be muted though because I don't want to get any copyright flags. Quite crazy to the young girl who is 18 years old and married her godfather, and folks don't know if that man is 48, 51, or 60 something, but whatever age he is, she got pregnant at 16, 17 years old, and she was absolutely groomed by her older man. If you are a child, if you are a millennial, a zennial, or older, and someone who grew up in the 80s or 90s, you know, we all know, like, when the call rooms and the round-the-way girl who was dating the older guy, because it'd be 14, 15, 16-year-old girls dating significantly older men because they had a car and they could take them to the Cheesecake Factory. Maybe they could, before the Cheesecake Factory, take them to Sizzlers. Culturally, like, you know, this has always been a thing in communities. It's just always kind of reinvented itself. And I feel like particular to like the Black community, that we had in recent history, we had gotten away and kind of came into an understanding of why these relationships were predatory, of being able to have these discussions and protect young people from allowing older men or women to come into their lives and groom them. It's particularly the case with R. Kelly and him finally being held accountable for the way that he groomed and manipulated young women, and us societally in a pop culture sense coming to a understanding of why that behavior is predatory and why that is wrong and unacceptable. But TikTok in particular repackages this sort of grooming as trendy. Not only is this not new, but like the particular understanding we have in the Black community reminds me of a book we recently read in September in the SBG book club. It's my book club. We even sat down with the author Disha Falau of The Secret Lives of Church Ladies, which is a collection of short stories. It's a super quick listen on Audible. So baby, if you haven't used Audible yet, audible.com/Julesy, or text Julesy to 500-500. Get your first month free on Audible. Then go pick up The Secret Lives of Church Ladies and listen to the story of Jael. Babes, Disha kind of really flips on the head the way culturally it was very normalized for young women to date older men. And in the particular story of Jael, her best friend was dating this older guy who drove a Cadillac. And, you know, as an adult reading it, that man ain't have nothing going for him. nothing. But to a young 14, 15-year-old child in the 90s, a man who could take them to the beach and buy them all the crab they want and buy their bathing suits seems real cute. Like, oh, he really loves me because he's spending money on me. And the way the story ends, the way Jael takes things into her own hands and seeks justice in that scenario. I'm not going to spoil it for you because it's absolutely a book you should pick up. It's literally a 4-hour listen on Audible. It's super short, but Disha really kind of gets to the crux of that sort of like the way grooming and predatory behavior was so insipid in our community at that time. And I feel like as much as we may have gotten away from it for the Black community with the, the accountability of R. Kelly and the different ways in pop culture we have been able to talk about predatory behavior, I do think that the way some of this messaging has functioned on TikTok and all converges together, it has set a very low bar, again, for older adults to come in and groom young people because their behaviors have been normalized for a new generation through platforms like TikTok. I mean, there's a girl on there talking about meeting her tennis coach at like 14, and now at 20 years old, she's in a relationship with him, and it's like, no, babes, that's absolutely grooming. You are a victim. That's not normal. I just want us to all be conscious of the messages that we are receiving because we all ebb in and out of vulnerable states. We are literally living through a pandemic. There's been so much grief and hardship this year, and we go in and out of vulnerable states of being, of believing that somehow we are to blame entirely for the ways we believe we failed in life, to how our young children, young teens, and young adults are utilizing these apps. And I want us all to just be more mindful, more thoughtful, and more careful. Thanks for watching, and thanks to Rev. You can find them on TikTok at Rev Conte. I don't speak no French. I'm gonna put their name right here on the screen. Thanks to them for helping me co-write this video, and thank you to Audible for allowing that partnership to happen. Deuces!